Thank you.
Okay, so here we are, the star of the show, Jim Ranahan, archivist, SPT, telling us all about Enid and Neville Usher, who are brother and sister. Is that
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll leave it to you. Please welcome Jim Ranahan.
Thank you very much, everybody. So I am Jim Ranahan, and I'm an archivist at Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. I'm here to share with you my limited knowledge and understanding about the Usher brothers and sisters. I'm here to learn from yourselves, if you knew them or of them, to help me strengthen the catalogue entries that we're preparing for their collections. So, in my role at the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, I strive to reflect the lived experience of Stratford residents through the collections that we hold. Tonight's talk focuses on two of those residents, Enid and Neville. Now, I'm not a genealogist, so this talk will not be a pure family history. Rather, I will focus on how aspects of people's lives can be discerned through collections, with the wider family history often coming from complementary sources. And as I say, I'm here to learn from those who may have more information than I currently do about Neville and Enid. Oh. Sorry.
I think it's top button.
Where should I be pointing? Is it at the projector or?
I can advance and just say.
Oh yeah.
Just say next.
Oh right, yes. Next, please. So, just a bit of background about the Usher family. This is a letter heading from the family business in Birmingham. Enid and Neville were born in Birmingham, and their parents were Frank Usher and his wife Nora, formerly Hans. Now, the family were based in Bordesley Green in the city, and Frank, our Usher's father, was literally born into the family business. He was born above the family business. As you can see from the letterhead, that business were drapers, outfitters, tailors, household furnishings, beds and bedding, rugs and carpets, and radios. Now, radios come into the story of Enid and Neville a little later on. In 1949, Frank and the family moved out of Birmingham to Somerset. So no connection with Stratford at all at this point. They moved to Somerset because Frank had suffered pneumonia, and he was very ill with that. And it was felt that the change of atmosphere and climate would do him good and help his recovery. He did recover and fell in love with Somerset, and the family set up guest house in Weston-super-Mare. They actually had a couple of guest houses over the period of time they were there. So much of Enid and Neville's childhood and early career were based in Weston-super-Mare, in and around Weston. And that gives the collections that we hold a particular flavour. In 1960, Frank Usher died, and the family, Nora, the wife, Enid and Neville, the children, returned to the Midlands, initially to Solihull and later to Stratford in the late 1960s, to Stratford upon Avon, where they lived in Hunts Road in a house called Baltimore. People that I've encountered when I've spoken about my interest in the Ushers, they talk of Nora, Enid and Neville being a close-knit family. And whilst from my talk I'll be focusing on Enid and Neville separately, just to give shape to their lives, we always need to bear in mind that they were very much a team together. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this photograph is of Enid in 1981. Enid was born in Birmingham, as I've said, on the 1st of December 1943. She attended Weston-super-Mare Grammar School for Girls, and when she left school, she was employed by W.H. Smith in the Western branch. This laid the basis for her later career, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Unfortunately, Enid died at a relatively young age on the 9th of June 1998. Roger Pringle, who was then the director of the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, gave the address at her funeral service, reflecting the strong links that Enid had developed with the Trust and the wider town over 30 years. Next slide, please. So just to focus on her childhood, on Enid's childhood interests. On screen, the news cutting and the membership card relates to the Women's League of Health and Beauty, the junior branch of the Weston-super-Mare Centre of the League. And the focus of the junior branch was exercise and grace, to instill exercise and grace in girls. And I've been advised by former colleagues at the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust that they actually drew my attention to Enid's poise and posture as an adult in Stratford, and also her determined stride across the town. And I'm just making the leap of a conclusion that stems, at least in part, from her exposure to the League in her early years. I'm not sure if you'll be able to. There are X's under some of the children on this news cutting. We don't have the key to who the children are, so because it's just the fading news cutting in our collection, we're not able to draw out which one is Enid, but it had. Oh, sorry, I've been working. Oh, sorry. I haven't got slides to reflect another aspect of Enid's childhood interests, but she attended Sunday school at St Paul's Church of England in Weston. And just as with the League of Health and Beauty, having a later effect or a later being later reflected in Enid's life. Her exposure and interest in religious education carried on into adulthood, and I'll talk more about that later on. But she became active in church matters as an adult and in Stratford, and she was a keen supporter and a committee member of the Bible Land Society, which was interested in work within Israel and Palestine. I'll try this, Lindsay. Operator error. Right. So, building a career, as I mentioned, Enid was employed by W.H. Smith, Western-super-Mare, and she studied through the Booksellers Association scheme to become a qualified bookseller, and she gained certificates in 1961 and in 1963, and we've got both the certificates and also letters of commendation from her employer and from publishers that she'd worked with as a bookseller, which gives a slight, it's an interesting insight into the development of a person's career. We've also got some references from when she came back to the Midlands. So I've got a reference when the family, Laura, Enid and Neville returned to the Midlands and they settled initially in Solihull. Wing Commander Hamilton of the RAF commented that Enid is an extremely pleasant and serene person, and that was she was doing some secretarial and secretarial work for the Wing Commander at that point. Now, you'll recognise the Shakespeare Centre on Henley Street. When Enid moved to Stratford, she worked initially at the Alveston Manor Hotel, and she was senior clerk in the accounts section, so she'd moved away from bookselling. A comment about her time at Alveston Manor Hotel is Enid's loyalty and integrity have been of the highest order. And that was from A.W. Hoskins, the accountant. In 1974, Enid returned to her chosen career as a bookseller. In 1974, she gained employment with the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust in the bookshop, and she worked there until 1982. She left, and I'll talk about that in a moment. She returned to the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust in 1989, and she worked there until 1998, and she was head of sales during that period with the trust. The intervening period of employment when the period between her two periods of employment with the trust were taken up with the Stratford upon Avon bookshop on Henley Street, as you can see here. This is 47 Henley Street. It's now occupied by Pride of Stratford. It had previously been Hunt's radio dealer, and I've been advised that when Enid moved into the bookshop, one of the first tasks was to remove redundant radio equipment that had been stockpiled up in the attic. Stratford-upon-Avon bookshop was owned jointly by Enid and Neville Usher. Enid was the professional bookseller. Neville was the company secretary. They owned that shop from 1982 to 1988, and we have the records, the business records for the bookshop. It's opened in December 1982, and it got off to quite a good start when we look at the news cuttings from the period that were saved by Enid. In 1983, the bookshop participated in Children's Book Week. In 1985, few things happened. In August of 1985, the bookshop won first prize in Stratford in Bloom for the small business section. In October 1985, the bookshop was featured in two publications. One, The Bookseller, and the second was Bookselling News. In 1986, there was a high-profile book launch, which you'll see a little bit more of in a moment. But unfortunately, in July 1988, the bookshop closed, and the decision was taken by Enid and Neville as the co-owners to close the shop. The combination of increased rents for the premises, and crucially the abolition of the net book agreement, which some of you may remember had previously prevented the large booksellers undercutting the small bookstores. When that was removed, it put businesses such as the Stratford bookshop at some risk. And I'd just like to say, if you think about the range of subjects that I'm touching on, it just shows what you can find in collections. So we've got an example of the fate of a small bookseller in Stratford, that people wouldn't normally think that the net book agreement would have a place in our collections. We've got just two short quotes to read out to you. Letters were submitted to the Stratford Herald by customers that were upset at the demise of the bookshop. So we have one quote: "An efficiently run small business, if ever there was one." And the second: "I have always been so satisfied with the service there, and will miss it very much."
Before you go on, Jim, I've got two questions.
Yes.
I'm a little surprised. Firstly, I'm a little surprised that she looks so much like our Helen Elliott. Sorry, Helen. The main question is, why is he wearing a glove?
Oh. Oh no, I think it's the shoes.
He must have very big hands.
Yeah, I think
sausage fingers.
Yes, I think so. We'll investigate that. I think it is his hands. Yeah. So yes, this is the book launch, and it's out of India. and as I say, it's 1986, but this is in Stratford Herald. So the company, through Enid and Neville, were pushing all the time to you know, keep the business active. Once the business had closed, Enid sought employment and was brought back to the trust, but as a head of sales, a head of retail, we'd say now. So just a small selection from many items of ephemera that were that we have that came from, that were collected by Enid. These items are taken from the original donation to the trust made by Neville not long after Enid's death in 1998. That collection of ephemera related to religious, literary and music events in Stratford and the surrounding areas. Taken together, I believe they give an insight into Enid's own interests, whilst also showing what Stratford offered residents and visitors at the time, and that period is the late 1960s through to the late 1990s. That is an area that I personally, as an archivist, would like to explore further in my work, if time permits me to do so. And I could literally just pick three items. As is the nature of ephemeral items, some are reasonably printed, some are flyers and don't look visually attractive but have information. So this is really just to say that Enid had a life, and an active life, beyond the beyond her employment and her career. I've just entitled this Enid A Social Conscience. The red poster, it's a book fair for Bethlehem from 1989. I mentioned previously that Enid was active in the Bible Land Society. It's now known as Embrace the Middle East as an organisation. And she was active in fundraising, using her professional skills to put on a book fair to raise funds for the work of the society, helping disabled Palestinians. And that work of the Bible Land Society and the use of book fairs to support it is reflected in the collections over a few different campaigns. So there was a campaign to help in Lebanon. There's this one for Bethlehem, and I think there's one for elsewhere in Israel and Palestine. The two photographs, they're actually from the Shakespeare birthday parades. I don't know if we use the word parade now, but the Shakespeare birthday celebrations, 1979 and 1981. So that's Enid in 1979 and Enid in 1981. And if anybody recognises who the other people in the photographs are, you'd be very welcome. I'd be very pleased to hear from you. Again, you probably won't be able to read that sign, but the sign is for it's for dispossessed Palestinians, and this was a feature of Enid's interest and commitment, was to try and be an advocate for dispossessed Palestinians in Israel and in the occupied Palestinian territories. And that is a feature that runs in parallel with her work and her commitment to the Bible Lands Society. Thank you. So that's what I've got to report on Enid. Now, Neville Usher, entering into the spirit of Shakespeare in Stratford and dressing in appropriate garb. I personally knew Neville Usher slightly. I worked on a committee with Neville, but I have less information to share with you about Neville than Enid, because the records are not as complete. That's down to the fact that the records that we hold were donated by Neville, and his focus was on to make sure that Enid's life was recorded rather than his own. So we do have material that is very interesting about Neville, but tonight I'm not going to be able to share as much detail as I have about Enid. But getting that caveat out of the way, Neville also was born in Birmingham and also grew up in Weston-super-Mare. He also moved back with the family to the Midlands, to Solihull and then to Stratford. And he set up the Stratford bookshop with Enid. He was also heavily involved with heritage activities in Stratford and in Warwickshire. He was a keen supporter of Shakespeare-related activities, as you can see. Sorry. Now, unlike Enid, who is into exercise and grace, Neville had technical interest as far as we can glean. So this is from the Festival of Britain, the Skylon structure in 1951. And this is the Bristol Brabazon airliner, one of the largest aircraft built in its time. And that photograph is at Filton, just outside of Bristol, in about 1950. So I find that interesting, particularly because I love aeroplanes, but also because it's Bristol, not far from Weston-super-Mare.
When was Neville born? Was he a lot older than you did?
1938.
Oh, so
Oh, thank you. That's a piece of information that I don't currently have. I didn't have, so thank you for sharing that. And thank you for that question. Thank you. Thank you. I'll catch up with you later. So this is a real result for me, so thank you. So you can see I haven't got many photographs, so I'm having to recycle. So this is Neville, and the photograph is courtesy of the Birmingham Post. I've mentioned that he was, sorry, I don't think I have mentioned before, Neville was an accountant and he was financial director of a manufacturing company. Neville applied his expertise to the Stratford bookshop by introducing computers. So he basically computerized the processes that Enid was using, computerized the operations. he introduced monthly accounts to balance sheets to control the stock. So he and Enid would know exactly where they stood on a regular basis. Now, Neville was known for his forthright manner, and that's typified by an excerpt from an article he wrote for Bookselling News in 1985. The article was on the computerisation of Stratford-upon-Avon bookshop. Our mistakes, including buying software through a dealer who knew nothing. And Neville addressed that issue and he resolved it and he computerised successfully. And he ensured that the bookshop became known as an efficiently run small business, as the letter to the Stratford Herald commented. This combination of effective accounting that had been introduced and also Neville's direct approach led to a timely closure of the bookshop when things were getting tough. He and Enid avoided having a long drawn out struggle because he and Enid were on top of their financial position at all times. So here is Neville in Shakespeare Birthplace Garden, Julius Caesar. Neville enjoyed living in Stratford and being part of the town's cultural life, as you can see. And again, if you recognise people, if you recognise people in the photograph, I welcome information. I thought a little bit about how I would represent Neville's engagement to enhance local life. And the best I could come up with were to pick logos of institutions that he was involved in for that purpose, for enhancing local life. The Stratford Society. You may be aware of the work that Neville did as an oral history interviewer. So interviewing and recording people's stories from around the town. He also worked on the project, the BBC People's War project, to record specifically wartime memories, and also to gather ephemera relating to those memories. The Town Trust, Neville's work with the Guild Chapel that's now administered by the Town Trust. I haven't got much information about his work with the chapel. That came out in discussions with former colleagues just a day or so ago. And then how I knew Neville, the Warwickshire Local History Society. Neville was a stalwart of that society for many years, holding down 3 roles now, requiring 3 people to deal with. So he was the treasurer of the society, he organised the lectures for the society, and he made sure that there was a very active excursions programme every year for members of the society. And the 4th logo up there, Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. He volunteered with the trust and he's warmly remembered, as was demonstrated to me when we put a little tribute in our staff and volunteer newsletter about Neville shortly after he died, and I had we had people talking to me about their memories of Neville. And at that point, I didn't realise exactly how much material we had for the Usher family, and it came to light after that time. So Cyril Bennis, in 1997, becoming the mayor of Stratford. The reason for that is that news cutting is a lone item in Neville's collection, and its significance isn't immediately apparent within the context of the collection. I'm actually very grateful to Cyril Bennis, who separately had provided context for his friendship with Neville, and that allowed me to understand why that news cutting was in Neville's collection. It was a memento of a friendship. And I think friendship links are important, but they're often overlooked elements in archive collections. And if we're able to trace friendship links, it's something that I feel strengthens the collection and can be of assistance to researchers. So that's why the news cuttings is up there. So please visit us. This is the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust Collections building in Gill Street. There are three main collections that you can refer to learn more about what I've been discussing tonight. So the first one, Stratford upon Avon Bookshop, get carried away. Enid Usher's collection and Neville's collection. Enid's is well catalogued now, and Neville's is coming along, but you will be able to access material as you wish. And if you've got any questions that aren't covered tonight, you can contact me there. So thank you very much. Yeah, and could I just ask that any questions aren't recorded, please? Just because you may ask questions about things that are in the news that I might not be able to answer to the best of the trust ability.